Good afternoon, everyone, and in some cases, good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the first webinar of the year for us. We are titled Driving Global Payroll from Workday. So today's webinar will be held or be led by Mary Holland, who is our payroll evangelist here at Payslip. And we'd also like to welcome today's guest speaker, Rob Bolt, who is a Workday consultant and HR technology manager. And Rob recently led a Payslip and Workday implementation with a client of ours, Suit Supply. So later on in the session today, Rob will be sharing all the details of that project with you all. And we're really looking forward to that, some really interesting information there. So just before we get started, just the normal housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to all attendees after the event. We'll also share the slides. You'll receive an email with all of that information. The webinars are also on demand on our website and YouTube channels, and we also will have them available as podcasts on our Spotify channel. So plenty of ways to catch up on the webinar again today. We do have a lot of people on, so everyone will be muted except for the panel. But if you do have any comments or questions, please post them in the chat box, and we have allocated some time at the end to be able to answer those. So before we get started, I'd just like to start off with a poll. So just one moment now. Hopefully that is available for you all to see. So the question today is, what global payroll approach have you adopted since implementing Workday? Are you considering your global payroll requirements right now? Is it on your agenda for later this year? Or, oh, sorry, that last thing, have not implemented Workday, but considering it and keen to understand how global payroll can work alongside it. So we'll just give the attendees time to answer that. Mary and Rob, I don't know if you want to throw it in and see what you think might the answers might be, or the top answer.
I think it's probably 1 or 3. So a lot of people are looking at Workday and looking at it from a holistic view of the whole transformation of the global payroll from HR operations to the payroll operations, where others may have already implemented Workday and now are considering looking at global payroll or what's actually happening. And it could be the difference of where you're actually operating in, because in the US, some people will be using the Workday payroll platform that's built into Workday and using that platform. So they may be doing it HR across the globe with US payroll and Canada payroll. And now maybe they're looking at expanding to outside of the US to make sure that they're getting their true value of the investment with Workday.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think, Rob.
Yeah, I'm expecting to see a nice mix actually of, I mean, yeah, I think most companies that I've been talking to, we're working with in relation to Workday, they at some point after Workday deployment, they were still considering different options for global payroll, or they left it because it was not feasible, or they don't think it's feasible. So I think I'm expecting to see a nice mix.
Well, with that in mind, I will end that now, and those results should be on screen for you guys to see. So yeah, oh, actually, a real 1 and 3 were the exact same. Actually, it's only 23% that have it on their agenda for later this year, which is also good. So I think the topics we're covering today will be perfect for the audience. Great. Okay, I will remove that, and we'll share the screen and we can get started. Just one moment. Now, should be able to see that now, and I'm just going to put it in screen share mode, but unfortunately technology is not.
Eva, I think you
it's moving.
I think you have it. Yeah, it looks like you have it.
Yeah. So you can see that. Okay, great. Do you want to start, Mary?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and start. So Aoife has, thank you, Aoife, for doing the nice introductions of Rob and myself. So let's just move forward with our agenda today. So we're going to talk about the Workday data challenges with global payroll. So that's going to be a key item to think about data. Why we drive global payroll, how you can drive global payroll from Workday. And we're going to be looking at how Payslip solves the data integration challenge that you have with Workday, and making sure that you're getting all of those data fields and integration points pulled together so that you have one source of truth for the global payroll space. And then we'll have a fireside chat with Rob, who's going to kind of share his insights across his 20 plus years of working with Workday, also looking and supporting management to make that decision to decide to go to Workday, looking at pointing out some of the pieces that were there. Now, Rob also, as Aoife shared, was key person that was involved in the suit supply, or bringing suit supply to Payslip. He worked on the team. I actually had spent a couple hours with Rob prior to the actually making the decision to go with Payslip. I asked him questions with our sales team. He asked me questions. And so it was very interactive, and he'll share how that journey went with suit supply. And so I think the attendees today will be very interested in that. And then it's also interesting to kind of share that Rob is in the Netherlands. So he has been working with many European clients across the board and kind of multinationals. So Aoife, we can move to the next slide. So we all know that Workday is the perfect HCM. And for people that are looking at the HCM journey, I think that as you do your kind of due diligence, you're going to decide that Workday is a great HCM that can contain all of the human capital management information that's available, has multiple pieces and power to be able to support your business strategically in any direction as you manage your workers across the world. But if we look on the right side of the shop, our global payroll teams also have many items that are happening in the organization. Depending on the countries that you're working in, you have local employment and compliance issues. You have different requirements to bring an employee on board. In some countries, you may need to find out, what church tax they're paying into, where others you're not going to have that information. Some countries you'll be collecting information on the personal family members in Asia that impact the taxation of that particular individual that you're actually paying. And then it goes into many other areas that you're responsible for: remote employees, your expats. You have to have all the data transfer of items. And then going into, when we look on the finance side, how are we going to deliver a general ledger and information of what's actually happening in the business? So all of those items the global payroll team are doing. So I would say all the individuals that are responsible on the call today have dealt with all these items, or are faced with all of these items as part of their everyday job responsibility that they're responsible for. But we know that the focus for Workday was not designed for global payroll. It was designed for an HCM system. But we will share today how Workday and Payslip can help you solve the global payroll challenges that you have, and have an integrated system that works together, Workday and Payslip, to deliver and be strategic leaders in your organization. So let's move on to the next slide, Aoife. So really what the problem is when we look at what the problem is in Workday, we don't have all of the data that's required for payroll in Workday. It's not going to be collected. It wasn't designed to be collected in human capital management systems. We have multiple locations across the globe, and how is that all set up in multiple different requirements? We also know that the data that's in Workday could or could not contain different items. It depends on how the Workday tenant was set up. Often I find some people aren't putting their one-time payments into Workday. They're using other sources. They may have their commissions in another source. The time and attendance may be, and you may be using Workday time and attendance systems, or you may be using other systems for that. What does that look like? You have benefits, you have Workday, you have expat information. So the problem is we have multiple pieces of data, and we don't really have any automation for all those feeds to be able to go to a single source to be able to provide the information to the payroll provider that needs that information. And if we're using the Workday data transfer that's available, we can only transfer the information that is contained in Workday. So if I'm missing data fields, they're not going to be in Workday. So we have to make sure that we understand exactly what's happening and where that single source is. We're going to talk a little bit more about data. What is the flow of the data? Where is the data stored today? Are you going to keep it in Workday? Yes or no, if you're on that journey to move to Workday. Those are decisions that you need to think about and know what those sources are as you start to enter some projects. If you already have Workday today, you need to understand all of the global sources of information that's coming in and what sources of information does payroll need to be able to do the payroll calculations correctly for every pay period. So let's move to the next slide, Aoife. So why do you use Workday to drive global payroll operations? So Workday is the single source of truth for your HR systems. So you have one system that maintains that information across the globe. You have the information of the employees, what their compensation is being paid, where they're located, and all of that information regarding the HR functions are being aligned to drive that business operations. Then once we have that single source of truth of using Workday, we need to use that information to drive global payroll operations. And this is where Payslip comes in. So let's move to the next slide, Aoife. So Payslip is a global control payroll platform. So one of the pieces that are part of the global payroll control platform is we have kind of the sun piece at the beginning where we have a standardized engine, we have workflow, validations, we have analytics, compliance, and reporting tools all built into the platform. So bringing your data in from Workday, your human capital information on the employees, the details of compensation, what you have stored in, goes directly into our platform. We have the ability to take the information from other sources than Workday, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. It could be your single source of information for commissions is from XYZ company, but we can still bring that into the Payslip platform. So you're bringing all of your data into the platform, and you're able to use our analytic engines to be able to validate that and automate the process that goes over to your payroll providers. So on the right side are your multiple different payroll providers that you have around the world. It could be, it can be the large payroll providers that are out there. It can be an accounting firm, could be a small local provider. We at Payslip know that payroll needs local payroll support. So you as an organization will choose which payroll providers that you want. We do not have any preference. We will work with any payroll provider that you have on the platform. The key is once the information is sent over to the payroll provider, then you're going to bring back into the gross to net. You're going to provide the gross to net report back to Payslip, and we will take and do all of the mapping and integrations to bring it into our platform. Many of our Workday clients will take the Payslips tax forms that come from your local payroll providers. They will be brought back into our platform, and then the integration will go directly back into Workday. And there is the ability also, if there's reports that you need to be pulled back from our platform back into Workday, you can set up that integration so that you're meeting the needs for your business. So let's move to the next slide, Aoife. So this is kind of high level how you do it. So on the left-hand side, we have all of the pieces that you may see in a payroll operations that have, job changes, compensation increases, if somebody's on a leave of absence, those wonderful one-time payments that actually sometimes are a challenge to get them all put together and what actually happens. And then on the Workday, you also have the ability to create Workday standard reports. So if that is something that you're using today, that can be used or brought into the Payslip system. So we can use that Workday standard report, or we can use the Peachy connector, which most companies are using the Peachy connector to bring the information back into Payslip. The information is then into Payslip. We have the ability to bring in other pieces from multiple sources, and then we're building that vendor connection. So when we talk about the vendor connection, that vendor connection is to whoever who is processing your payroll today. We will build that vendor connection in the format that they actually need to be able to process payroll. So today, when you're processing payroll, your vendor has said we need it in XYZ format. That will be the format that we will provide over to the payroll provider with all of the information that is required to be process payroll in that particular location. And the big piece about this is we have a workflow engine that's tracking all of the pieces of what's happening with the due dates, the exchange of data. We have the automation, we have the change log, all of that's being recorded so that you're always audit ready. When the payroll results come back in, they will be delivered back into the platform for your review. We have a payroll reconciliation tool that will help you reconcile your inputs to your outputs. It will give you the information of the changes and the deltas that have happened. So you as a single person can see the true operations of what's actually happened quickly on a dashboard and verify that the results are correct. And then I mentioned already the payslips and tax documents, which is a huge win for the single employee experience, because we all know today our HR teams, if we're in 50 countries, if somebody asks our HR business partner, where do I see my payslip or tax document? It's easier just to say it's right in Workday. You'll see this information in the portal right there under yourself. So this eliminates many questions on resetting passwords. It gives the employer, the individual workers, the ability to get the information 24/7 when they want the information regarding their pay and tax documents. So let's move to the next slide, Aoife. So Payslip and Workday have been working together. We have a little roadmap here where we started in actually in January of 2023 that we were recognized partner. And then we went through the certification process in December of 2023. Now, one of the key pieces that the Workday auditors that came in and looked at all the processes of the integration, came back with all of the audit pieces and worked with our integration teams, we were able to finish that audit and review of all of the work within 3 months. And Workday came back and told the team that was working on this project they were the fastest in the Workday history. So now we now have that partnership and relationship and certified integration available. And we have more information that's coming in 2024 as we continue to be working closely with Workday, looking at ways that Payslip can support Workday. And Workday is also talking to us on how we work on our integrations, how we're working with the data, and what can both of us work together to be successful to provide a good solution for managing global payroll using HR and the payroll requirements across the globe. So let's go to the next slide. So we're going to have a fireside chat with Rob. As I kind of shared a little bit about him, he has many years of experience, and one of the pieces that's really good is really he has insight. Sometimes he is brought in at the beginning of the project when somebody's making a Workday decision, could be brought in kind of to help manage the project with the project management team after this decision has made. He has experience in the HR operations, the global payroll space, And he recognizes that HR is a human capital system that is a major player in the industry, and also understands kind of the limitations of data being passed and what you do to solve it. So Rob met Payslip, I think about 18, 19 months ago at a Workday event. So kind of that's where sometimes we all meet up. And one of our salespeople where individuals were attending one of the Workday events and connected with Rob, and then we connected with Rob, and it's been, for us and for me, it's been a great experience getting his insights. So I'm happy to kind of have our fireside chat, and then we'll move into talking about the suit supply that he has worked on with Payslip directly. And we gave you Rob's LinkedIn link. He's happy if you want to reach out to him after the webinar today with any questions, and he'll be happy to respond back to you. So, Rob, are you ready for our kind of fireside chat? And
Absolutely.
then we'll jump in. We'll kind of talk about suit supply next, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So my first question is, what are the core reasons you think Global Payroll and Workday need to be aligned?
I just wanted to do a step back. I think, yeah, it's obvious that you want to have Workday and Global Payroll aligned. But if you're starting to think about Workday, or considering a Workday implementation or any other global HR system, what I see typically is that people are focusing on the HR system, and have some kind of logic that payroll comes after that. What I see then happening because I've been in those projects where the focus was on Workday, and initially they'll say, yeah, well, a high level, we need to set up like a project, a scope, project plan. Oh, you have 15 countries. Let's pick the 4 biggest ones. We'll set up a PT for that, and we'll make sure that we provide you with reports for the other countries, because financially it's not really interesting to build PG files for all the countries. That's just too much of an investment. So typically, I think the start off would be with PG integration for the major countries. And then what happens then after a couple of years, what I see happening is that these big countries are fine. They have their PG integration, but the 10 other countries are really struggling. Right, because first priority always is payroll. It's never your HR system, because they want to make sure that people get paid in time and get the right amount. So that's what the focus is. So what I see happening then is that the attention from Workday is sliding away to payroll, and people put payroll first, and then they make sure that the data in payroll is fine because they want to run their payroll. And then after that, they're starting to update the data in Workday, and that's really not what you want to achieve, and it's really bad for adoption. So I think if, like you said, why is it important to have Global Payroll and Workday aligned? You want to make sure that your system adoption, your data quality is in good order, and that's why you need to start thinking about your payroll integration as soon as possible. And I hear myself saying this, but for a lot of people, I don't think it's logical to start thinking about integrations at the start of a Workday project. But if you look at it from a data perspective, it totally makes sense, because you need to understand, need to have like an overall architectural picture of your data. Where is it coming from? Where is it going to? What will be in Workday, what not? Because you need to set up your scope in Workday. You need to determine, will we have absence? Will we have time tracking? And how is that going to feed into payroll? And what are the options? So I think it's good at the start of the project to start looking at the different alternatives and options that you have in terms of payroll and payroll integrations. I think that's key. And I think that's a lesson that I think many companies, and I myself as well, have learned the hard way by being frustrated that the countries were not happy with Workday. They said, it's double keying. We already have a system. Why are you giving us Workday? It's working for us. So, and that puts you in a bad spot, and there's no happy faces. So you want to avoid that. So I think it's good to consider those integrations as soon as you can.
Well, Rob, I think that's a key piece, because the kind of the importance of data has become extremely important today, right? We need the data to make strategic decisions, and senior leadership is asking for more and more data to define exactly what's happening, because they have operations. If you look at 50, 100 countries that you might be doing business in, how are you going to be able to get that information? So data is important. I think before, people didn't have any understanding. There could be multiple sources of where that information is. We have vast programs in some companies with, many compensation pieces coming from many programs that are being offered, some enhanced benefit programs, equity programs, some of the different lunch vouchers. If you just look at in some countries where that is, where is all that coming? But if you don't know the sources, you're right, you have to kind of map that sources and do that, what I'd say, that discovery piece or the deep dive to be able to make sure it's going to work for you. So I think that's really key, because that's the one question everybody's asking. Where's the data? Can I have the data now? I need a report, right? All of those pieces are things that we're challenged with today. And I think in the world we live in, we expect the data to be instantaneously delivered to us, right? We have a different expectation than we had years ago, besides consolidating crazy spreadsheets together. So I think that's a very good pointer for all of us to think about on that piece. So my next question is, what advice would you give to Workday users when it comes to global payroll?
Oh, yeah, that depends on where they are. What part of the journey are they? Yeah, I learned it probably. There's probably many on the call that have same experience, but I see a lot of companies struggling with that. And the sales pitches are always great, but the real life is always different. And I've seen companies that try to have a global vendor with a platform, a global vendor that was working with different local subcontractors, and there's a huge amount of different combinations. I've not seen a single solution work for anybody yet. So I'm looking forward to hear if there's good feedback where I should have a look at in the future. But what I typically see is it's a hybrid. It's not black and white. People are not happy with their vendor. If they have a global vendor, they're not happy with them for all the countries because they're missing some critical stuff in Belgium. They don't understand it, or they have some stuff in the US that they don't understand. So I think it goes back to the story that you told a little bit earlier, is that so from my perspective, and that's I think where Payslip has an excellent position, is that it's independent of the payroll vendor that you have. So if and crazy stuff that we did during Suit Supply in the middle of our project, and we had a very tough timeline. We did 6 months for Workday. We did workforce management, so that's a scheduling solution. We set up a master data hub for all the HR data, because we're in retail, we have a lot of disparate systems, and we did payroll integration, everything same time, 6 months, pretty crazy, but it worked. And what we also did, it wasn't good enough. We wanted to swap our payroll vendor in Belgium. So that's also something that we did at the same time. And the good thing is that if you're happy with a payroll vendor, a solution like Payslip, it really doesn't matter which vendor you're working with. I mean, it's a little bit too black and white. Of course, it matters a bit. That's like getting to know the vendor, understanding the platform that they have, and see how you best get the data across. It's more like the technical side. So if they have better resources, it's a lot easier. If they're used to work with Payslip, even better. But all in all, you're vendor independent. So that gives you as a Workday customer, as a company, the freedom to make your timeline, and you're not forced to swap vendors for countries. So you can look at global payroll. It doesn't have to have an impact on your payroll vendors. And that's something I think it is completely different. because I think many companies were thinking about, yeah, we need to consolidate payroll. We really need to go to global payroll. That means that we need to throw all the vendors out and stay with one, which is really global. And there's just a limited list of those. But yeah, I think that's one of the key points why Supply selected Payslip, is because you guys are independent of the of payroll companies. And that's a very good thing. So that gives you opportunity to tailor make your own approach to global payroll. And what I like a lot, and you mentioned also the data part. For me, I see Payslip as like a central hub for all payroll data. So that brings all the global payroll data together. And that's a very strong point. And then you do the logistics and make sure that the data is distributed to the right endpoint. But from a Workday perspective, I just need to make sure that I bring all my Workday data with this global PG file into the Payslip platform. And for the data that's not in Workday, have some additional reports or set up some automation to make sure that that data is added there. But after that, the whole distribution and the local integrations are being picked up by Payslip. So that takes away, I think, a big part of concern of for customers.
Yeah, Rob, your comments about going to one provider. We know in the world one size doesn't fit all. It's not the same, and in some locations, the payroll is so complex that you really need that local support. You need to be able to pick that provider. That provider may be also doing some HR functions for you, or accounting functions. And having that ability as you either, you scale up or scale down, right? So there's changes that happen in our organization. We may be scaling up and acquiring companies, but we also may be doing some downsizing and resizing. And with that piece is, we do have the ability with Payslip for you to change your provider. Is a very easy process, but one of the key pieces that I personally see as an advantage to payroll professionals and audit pieces, you don't lose the information you had from the first provider. You have that in the platform. So if an audit comes up or there's a question of something, it's there for you. The data is there to be able to do reporting and pieces on it. And then you have when it came in, what changed, what the workflow is. So you have all of the information to move forward, and you kind of highlighted that. And that's always the biggest challenge of, how do I find somebody that I know is going to do a good job on my payroll, and what's going to happen. And you have the data is going to tell the story. The data will say if they're on time or they're late or what's happening once you have that data. When you start to measure, you can always do process improvements, right? If we're not measuring, we don't know what's really happening. So my next question is, and you kind of touched on this and we talked about this, is from a client benefits, what do you think Global Payroll at the start of a Workday implementation brings to the table? If you decide to consider Global Payroll and they're part of the team, what are some of the benefits you've seen when the company has said, yes, let's pull in those folks from payroll and other stakeholders and they're part of our core project decision to select Workday as our human capital management, and they're thinking about the business needs across the organization?
Yeah. So I think some companies think like, if you do Workday, you need to start consolidating payroll in some way, or need to have a global payroll. But I also see many companies that are not even thinking about that. They think about, okay, it's everything certified, nice. So people think like it's automatically going to flow into payroll. And how can it be? Payroll just push the button once a month, so should all be fine. And that's really a very big underestimation, I think, of the whole process, of the complexity of it. And yeah, I think again, I don't think you even need to think about global payroll. You just need to think about your process, your data flows. And you need to understand how important it is that the data that you're talking about, single source of truth. That means that automatically the data that you have in Workday should be also distributed to other parts in the company, including payroll, that are depending on this HR related data. So I think that's key. I think thinking about global payroll, that I think it could be confusing. I would like to focus on the data and make sure that your system is being used, that your Workday adoption is in a good spot after your rollout, and that is key. And that will automatically then, I think, drive towards a more aligned solution for getting data from Workday to a solution like Payslip, but also to the payroll vendor. I think that you mentioned earlier that so my first introduction with Payslip was on a party. It's always good to start on a party with Michael Steen. I think everybody knows Michael. And then we said, well, this is such a simple approach, right? Get the data from Workday, build a global PG file, bring it to Payslip, and Payslip's going to do the distribution. That's such a strong model. We didn't talk about global payroll. We just were thinking about why wasn't there anybody else that came up with this idea to make the integration bit and the distribution so much easier for Workday customers. Because if you compare this to the existing solutions, it's a big difference. It's really a big difference. And that's also one of the lessons I think that we learned. You have to explain this to your payroll vendor. You have to explain this to your implementation partner. And that's, I think, what's one of the key things that we did. We spent a lot of time on explaining to the payroll vendors, but also we had separate sessions with the implementation partner, just working together with them, get their thoughts on the approach, so we could work together as a team to set up our project plan and strategy and timeline together based upon this approach.
Okay, I think that's a good approach to look at it, as the data, what's needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's needed and where is the data, and you mapped out the approach, and you talk to stakeholders. I think that's the big piece of, is there something missing in the data? You know, is there, you know, sometimes often in projects, we find there's an integration that no one knew about until it's
always
it's not, you know, all of a sudden they say, well, this integration does XYZ for the organization.
Yeah.
And then it's not in the scope of the project. So it's kind of getting that data, looking at the integration, really what you need up front, and evaluating that. Yeah. So let's pop over to our slide on suit supply, because Rob, as we started, you know, meeting and at a Workday event was fun with Michael Steen and some of our other team members. But Suit Supply is a very, very interesting company. Over the time, I see them in many locations. So I've seen them in San Francisco. I saw them down in Southern California. I live in Silicon Valley area, so I actually saw them at one of the high-end shopping centers. So it was very interesting, and in Austin. So they really are quite a unique company. And one of the challenges, of course, as we look at Suit Supply, is we have different type of workers there, right? We have, you know, office or admin and senior strategic people that are doing that, but we also have the workers that are in the stores that are doing that work. So you have the huge impact on the time, right? The time pieces for the workers. And then you have the, you know, what we call the administrative people that are running the piece. Another key piece of information, as Amsterdam is their headquarters, kind of a neat place. If you've been to Amsterdam, it's amazing. And so this is kind of a snapshot of their suits if you haven't seen Suit Supply. Rob, I don't know if you want to share anything else about Suit Supply, and maybe we can just kind of dig deep into you being brought in and how you worked with kind of the project management team before the contract was signed, when they brought you in at the beginning with Workday, before the contract was signed with Payslip. And of course, I still remember all the questions I had for you on that day to kind of answer your questions, but I gave you many more as we discussed Payslip and the Workday project, along with the time and attendance.
Yeah. So it's your question if I want to tell a little bit more about Suit Supply or
Yeah, kind of share your journey and how you got brought in and then working with the management to get everything in place.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, Mary, was that we talk to stakeholders, and of course that's something that we do throughout the project. And sort of one of the first things was to go to a store and talk to people in the stores about their experiences with the different systems, because in retail there's like many different. You have the till system, but you have your booking system if you want to make an appointment with one of the sales associates, and the employees have they can see the stock. There's a clienteling to contact customers before they have an appointment. So there's a lot of different systems. And the first thing that they said, and I remember that we were at NRF, that was just in New York last year. And then we went to the store, we did a tour in New York, and they said, well, help us to get rid of this spaghetti. And that was one of the themes of our project, get rid of the spaghetti. And I think that has become a theme because we, like I mentioned, we set up like an HR master data hub, but it's also like a similar approach to what I see with Payslip. I mean, that's the way that I see it. I see it as a hub, and for me, that's like a logical way to distribute your data. But what going back to Suit Supply, what I think makes a difference is the attention for the customer. So I don't typically see that in retail companies, that there's so much contact with customers. So you can make an appointment, but a sales associate will reach out to you before. We'll have like a social talk about what's the occasion, where you need this for. We'll know what you've ordered in the past. They can take measurements. So there's a lot of data there and a lot of contact points with customers. And I think that's part of the success, because I hear a lot of get a lot of positive feedback from customers that have been Suit Supply customers. So whenever you say you have been working for Suit Supply, they start to talking about their experience. So that's very nice. And yeah, it's nice to be working in a company that has such a positive vibe, I would say.
Well, Rob, one of the interesting things is at the very beginning, the company decided, made a business decision to do Workday, go into Allegiant for their time and attendance system. So we know that's important. And then, of course, Payslip. So all three were part of the project plan. Do you want to share, how you set that up and kind of the operations or the planning piece that was pulled together to make that happen?
Well, yeah, well, it was a big program because of the complexity. Yeah, we had a discussion about payroll integrations. But at a certain point, there was a financial discussion about what the cost of all those payroll integrations would be. And I brought my meeting with Michael on the table. And then we said, well, maybe this is something as an alternative that we should also consider. So that's what it all started. And when we started to organize some meetings, we brought in implementation partner also to have a look at it. And then if you look at the business case, I think from a financial perspective, comparing PG files for multiple countries with the Payslip financial proposition, I think that was the big the selling point. I'm not going to dive into the details here, but yeah, I think that was the big difference. And like you said, the flexibility, it's quite easy to swap a country and go to a different vendor or add different countries at a later point. It's not too much effort. And that's also a big difference, I think, with Workday, because if you want to add a country, you want to set up a PG integration, that's a big chunk of work. That's a lot of money that's involved in that. And I think that part, I think that's very important. Apart from the whole technical part, from the data part, which I think it's obviously that's the most important thing. But financially, if you're not able to sell something to the board or the CEO or CTO, if this is not in line with the Workday, if your budget, I mean, it's a financial discussion.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that was for us. We said, well, this is a no-brainer. We have to do this.
Well, it definitely was, you know, a no-brainer, but you also, as we went through the project for the 6 months, you had, you know, 3 different players, you know, 3 different vendors doing their services. So the collaboration was important.
That was
The collaboration, the rollout of when it's going to happen with a good mapping timeline was extremely important, because you can't do the testing with any of the time and attendance or payslip if we don't have the Workday platform set up, and that kind of planning and pieces. I also, from a business review of being on some of the implementation calls, I wasn't on all of them, but I saw the team very much collaborating. So the teams were collaborating depending on, you know, if they were in HR or a payroll role, they all got their knew what their tasks were, but they were working together. So that collaboration came forward because of everything being aligned. And what I would say, Suit Supply made sure everybody was aware of what the project was, right? So those are kind of key pieces that we were making. I mean, those are a lot of changes happening when you're touching 3 areas, right, of what's happening.
Yeah, so Mary, you're absolutely right. I think it was key to have representation of Legion Workforce Management, or Workday, and Payslip in our steercos, and to have good alignment. If you're talking about design sessions, those were key, because design decisions that you make on the Workday side has an impact on Legion, and vice versa, because we were doing absence in Legion with a direct link from Legion to Workday, and Legion was rather new to Europe because they're a US-based company, and I think we were the first one using Legion outside the US. I think we were competing there with Converse, who was the first, but I think we won. So that was an extra challenge. But then it's absolutely key to have everybody around the table and have a good understanding of data integrations and work together as a team, because otherwise you're not able to do this in this short amount of time. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, that the data was mapped out of where it was coming from and the different sources from that particular view, and that's why it could move forward. But also the team was aligned where the data was coming from and how the flow worked, because often sometimes, you know, you might see one team doesn't know what the process is and they're at the end point, and that typically that happens in the payroll space, but everybody was aligned. And I would say, from a business perspective, you brought the correct business. If you want to look at how you measure success on this, you brought the correct business partners to provide their contributions and where the data was and the sources. And then, you know, the change management piece, and also challenging, why are we doing it this way? You know, there's been some discussions that have been on that, you know, why do we have to do this manually? Why can't we do it this way? Right. So challenging status quo, I think, was another piece, and the piece of making sure it worked. But because you had 3 working together, you were challenging it together and looked at the best solution for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I definitely think it was a fantastic project, and I think the collaboration. I remember asking you questions at the very beginning when Michael from the sales team asked me to join a call and said you wanted to do all 3 in 6 months, and you know, I said, well, does he have resources? Are they aligned? What about change management? Who knows what's happening? Do they have the players in place? So I kind of gave Rob a bunch of questions, and he came back and answered them. So he had already done his homework and was aware of the plan. But those are all things we have to think about as we enter into a project. And data is key, because that's what we're moving data around, right? So that's what the business needs us to use, and we use it across the organization. So Aoife, I know some of our attendees are probably interested in asking Rob and myself a few questions. So do you have some questions for us?
Yes, yes, one moment, and people can post them there in the chat. Just one moment now, and I will get the questions up. Sorry about this, the chat piece can be a bit.
No, that's okay. I mean, Rob's he highlighted some great highlights of the data, what happened with suit supply, the kind of collaboration. Remember, we have systems and data and all the pieces, but we still do need that human factor of collaboration and working together to be successful. And that's the value that we have in our organization. So that's kind of key to bring up too, because it was great collaboration.
Sorry about this now. Okay, we're getting them in now. One moment.
Okay. Sorry. Technology is always fun, especially when we're on on webinars and presentations, live or even in person.
So we have a question here about deploying Workday without global payroll integrations. Is that the wrong approach, or which stakeholders would you need to talk about, and what's the best way to inform your leadership teams? So I think they're asking the question there: should you deploy Workday and global payroll together, or and what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think it's not necessarily the right question at the beginning of the project. I think it's important to understand. I mean, if there's a good reason to change your payroll vendor, of course, that's the right moment to do that. But from a payroll perspective, right? But from a Workday perspective, I would say it's important to make sure that Workday is a single source of truth. That means that you should automate the flow of data, from my perspective, as much as possible from Workday feeding into your payroll vendors' platforms. If that does that require global payroll consolidation or any major changes in your payroll contracts? Not from my perspective.
No, Rob, I don't think you need to look at it from that angle. I think the global payroll team or representatives should be part of the discussions on the data, the fields that are being stored into Workday. Many times, people are forgetting things that are important. Like I strongly believe you should use the HR system to its maximum, because it's a huge investment. And that means, can we get those one-time payments into the system? What information can we store that we have in the system that can be stored in Workday, so that we can have that data integration over? And payroll can share during those discussions and be part of that team. They can bring insights to explaining, right? Worker types, and sometimes people don't understand there's different worker types, and they just put people into one bucket. But there's different worker types that you might need, especially in the world we have today, or even bringing up issues of challenges you have when people are on like an expat assignment versus moving from one location to the other. So those information and data points of what is needed can be part of the team and having discussions. And having done a Workday integration, and I was the project lead on the payroll side, and I worked very closely with the project manager on the HR team, and we had worked on other projects together. To be very honest with you, it worked out very well. The teams they did it also in a 6-month period, but the teams were very much aligned. And in some cases, when a question came up from a Workday data source, or why you need this or not need this, sometimes it was, well, this is why you need it for payroll. So I would bring insight to payroll pieces of why we would include it or not include it, because this is your opportunity to get the most out of the system when you're collaborating together and looking at the data source we need, because if you have a single source of the information, then the data can go to where it goes to the next step. That if you're going to look at changing payroll providers and all of that inside a big project, it may fail. I'm just going to be honest, because it's too much. It's too much. You need to get the starting point correct, and then look at what your next steps would be.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Mary. And I also would like to add that it is absolutely important to have payroll your payroll team represented in the project team, because your way of working will most likely change as well. And that's why it's very important to be involved in that, just to get an understanding what's going on. How can you run your payroll? Where will the checks be? Retro changes, who will enter those? Corrections, who will enter those? What's the role of payroll? And that will have an impact when you start rolling out a system like Workday.
Yes, especially when if you had no integration today, right? And you're moving to
yeah.
integration.
Yeah.
There's always the fear is the data's going to be
That's a different
correct.
feeling. Oh no, it's all automated.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
God. Yeah, don't worry, it's automated.
Okay, Eva, what's the next question for us?
We just have one more in, and we're just close to time. So do I need a certified Workday consultant to design, build, and test the Payslip integration?
That's a good question. I think from a Workday perspective, Workday as an implementation partner, the people that are from the implementation partner building a pitch integration as part of your rollout, they should be certified. If you are comfortable after go live, you have your own team, you have your own integration specialist that is not certified, I think they're fine to build a pitch integration. I think it's the testing that is key, not so much whether this person is certified. So if you want to make an adjustment of your pitch integration, you should be able to do that. But obviously testing is key. But maybe Mary, you have, I've not heard the requirement for certified Workday integration consultant on customer side, right?
No, there's not a requirement. So you need to have the PG integration file. And so interesting enough, some of our clients will go to certified third parties. We do have some clients, believe it or not, that did it themselves. And to me, there's a few of them that are just absolutely amazing, and they're adding things in. One particular member is part of a payroll team, and she works on the integration piece, and she's added, benefit pieces into the PG, and she knows the things within, talks about what she wants on a call, and then the next, within an hour or so, she has the file because she knows the layout and the file. So I think it's really understanding the PG piece of it, and who's going to do it is kind of determination on the company. And the more you can not depend on like an outside party, the more it's going to be probably quicker and faster to get things that you need changed. Because in any type of project like this, we want always continuous process improvements, right? Things are going to change. We bring in, the world changed with COVID, but now we have to look at remote workers. What does that look like? What's happening? What's going to be our next challenge? But we need to have, the system has to be agile and flexible to be able to bring that information in, because that's data that we need. We have new data requirements. Let's just put it from that particular perspective. So I think it depends on how comfortable the company is and what resources they have internally, but we don't require that. We just require that we get the file and we have a team to do testing together, and people do testing, because testing can never be underestimated, because that's when you find out what's working and not working, and not to shortchange that item, I would say.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions in, which brings us right up to the time. So thank you very much, Rob, for joining us today. And Mary also for leading the conversation. And thank you to all the attendees. And as I've mentioned at the start, you will receive an email over the next couple of days with a link to this recording. But it'll also be available on our website if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. And any questions in for Rob, you have his LinkedIn information, or you can send directly to us and we'll send them on to Rob. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice rest of day.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.